Yes.
No problem.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all for participating. So I think we're just going to give it a couple more minutes. We need to set up the live stream as well. So as soon as that's done, we can jump right into today's session.
Has everybody been able to contact their teammates? I said that a bit earlier, but more people joined since then. If anybody has not contacted their teammates, let me know. You can speak here as well right now.
Okay, shall we get started?
Yes, I think we can go ahead now. All right then, so I'll start off today. Okay, so thank you guys for showing up today as well. And yesterday, just to for a quick recap, what we did was the preparation phase where we learned what to do and how to draft a mediation plan or a position paper, how to identify your positions, interests, goals, objectives, BATNA, WATNA, just to get an idea of where you stand in this mediation, what you want to get out of this mediation, and if anything is presented to you in the actual mediation, how better off will you be if you leave that offer, or which is your BATNA, or else how worse off will you be if you do not take that offer. So it kind of prepares you. That stage is extremely important because it prepares you for the mediation session. And during the mediation session in itself is a whole different process altogether. And that is what we will be focusing on today, which is mediation process and communication skills and what happens at the mediation table. So today, overall, we will be covering effective opening statements. So if you remember from the first class on day one, I had talked about something called a two triangle method, where we had 6 phases about how any mediation competition goes, your preparation, and going into the actual mediation session, where you start off with introductions, then you talk about information gathering, um, your brainstorming, communication skills, and then finally getting to an agreement. So this is kind of the table of contents, and these are the 5 topics which we will be broadly covering today. We'll be starting off with opening statements, which includes your introductions and the very first impressions of what every party thinks at the table. Then you go into an information gathering session where you are just asking questions and collecting all the information and confidential information if possible, or the other party's interests, and try to get it all out on the table so that there is no bad faith left and everything is just out there. Then you go into the option generation phase where you start creating different options and solutions based on what is the information you've gathered in the previous part. And then you go into actual negotiation of those solutions which you generated, by negotiating on the specifics of each of the solutions, And for that, you will definitely need some good communication skills. And by the end of the session, you will be trying to reach a negotiated agreement. So that's what we will be covering today. Moving on, okay, so we've gotten a suggestion from Pradyuman. He says that if you guys could give us an insight into what creative solutions you came up with during your ADR competitions would help us in knowing what direction we should think of towards during our rounds. I think we can come back to that much later during the part when we come to brainstorming solutions. So we can come to that, and even after the session, we can hang around and answer questions if you like. All right, so starting off with effective opening statements. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, the first starting point comes from the mediator. Before any particular mediation session, it is assumed, or most of the times, the parties haven't had a chance to interact with each other. There might be some really high emotions already flowing in the beginning of the session. There, people might not be very welcoming towards each other, and that's the job of mediator, to make sure that everybody is comfortable and calm. And that's how the mediator starts any particular mediation session. So the first thing you do as a mediator is ask everybody to introduce themselves and ask them if they have the authority to be here and make decisions for their client, for their counsel, or for their client, or whoever they're representing. And do they come here with full authority? So you ask them, everybody, starting with the requesting party client first, everybody introduces themselves, say, it would be something like, "Hi everyone, I am Sweeney Khara. I am the Trade Minister for FINEM. Along with me is Mr. Vivek Krishnaswamy. He is my counsel here today. And feel free to address me as Sweeney. And I would request the other party to go ahead with their introduction." So this just saying that you can address me informally as just Sweeney, it kind of eases up the tension in the room and makes it much easier to remove all the formalities of calling Miss Khara or saying Madam Mediator or anything like that. So you start off, mediator asks everybody to introduce themselves. And once the introductions are done, then you move into the actual opening statement of the mediator, which is, you start off by explaining the scope of mediation and your role. So if you remember, I sent you an email last night, which was a sample opening statement from client, mediator, and counsel. Hopefully you got a chance to take a look at it. In that, if you remember correctly, the mediator starts off by explaining that today the mediation, welcome to the mediation session. We are so glad I have the opportunity to mediate this particular session. The scope of the mediation is basically, you explain what you will be covering, whether that the mediation is a voluntary process. The parties have selected XYZ rules which will be governing the process of mediation. And then you also go ahead and explain your role in the mediation session, which is that you will be playing a facilitated role over here. You will try your best to make sure that there is effective communication flowing on the table. You're addressing every party's needs and concerns, and you will make sure that you have a proper session where everything is discussed properly in the most respectful manner possible. Then you go ahead and also explain that you will be impartial and neutral in the round. That is extremely important to mention, because as a mediator, you have to play a neutral party. You have to listen to both the sides. You cannot pass judgments on either side of the either party. You have to maintain the stance that you're listening to both the parties and considering everybody's interest and not favoring one side. The main part of any mediation session is confidentiality. So you have to assure both the parties that this particular round or this particular session will be confidential in nature. Anything you say in this particular room will not go beyond the four walls of this room. Anything you say in this room cannot be used against you in an actual courtroom, in a further litigation that you may pursue. Even the mediator, as a mediator, I cannot be called as a witness in any kind of courtroom proceedings. So assuring confidentiality to both the parties is important so that they feel that they can be frank and open and in the session and freely talk with the other party and in front of you as a mediator to discuss different issues and feel safe, make it a safe space for people to say anything that they want. Next, you also go ahead and ask for emphasize on the need for respect and honesty. Ask the parties to be very open and frank in their approach. Try and not use too many tactics that might not be impressive to the other parties. Ask them to be very open by putting out your interest freely on the table. Try to be respectful at the same time. Make sure you're not making, just make sure you're, as a mediator, you're telling the parties that you do not make any uncalled allegations on the other party. You are maintaining decorum in the room. You have to make sure that everybody is calm at all times. There is no throwing of things happening around, as we had discussed yesterday. So that will be on the mediator. And in general, your job will be to make them feel comfortable. I have seen a lot of mediators in different rounds say that this is in physical rounds. They say that if you're feeling cold, please let us know. We can turn down the fan. If you want some water, please, we have some water over here for you. If just make them feel comfortable. Just, are you comfortable where you're sitting? I hope the lighting in this room is fine, but that is just going too much. But that would happen in a real session. But you can again say such things in one or two lines to make sure that everybody is feeling comfortable. And the last part is setting agendas after consulting the parties. Now, setting agendas happens at the very end of the opening statement of the mediator. So it starts off with asking the parties to introduce themselves. People introduce themselves. Mediator explains the process of mediation, the scope, their role, neutrality, confidentiality, everything else, making people feel comfortable. Then you again ask them, now I would request all the parties to please uh, start off with your opening statements and give your first impressions about the issues, starting with the requesting party. So the requesting party client goes first, they give their opening statement, then comes the requesting party counsel, then the responding party client and responding party counsel. And once all four opening statements are done, that's when you say, all right, so from what I understand or what I hear from every one of you is that these are your concerns. You start summarizing whatever you've heard from both the parties. Don't go person by person because that takes up a lot of time when the session is just for 1 hour. Just summarize in total. Just say that I understand the main concern of Panem would be to revive their economy, especially with shrimp imports, and look at future collaborations. And I hear the same from the other party. So that's how you quickly summarize everything that is being said in the room. And then you move on to setting the agenda. Now, I have stated after consulting parties. Now, consulting parties is extremely important because it's a party driven process. Mediator is a facilitator over here. So you need to make sure that all the parties are agreeing to the agenda which you're setting for the day. So you can start off by saying, as I see it, having summarized everything you've said in your opening statements, the first agenda can be that to talk about the shrimp imports and exports and restarting the same. So, and then you set down 2 or 3 agendas by yourself if you want to, and then you ask, do all the parties feel comfortable with this agenda? Do you want to rephrase it? Do you want to add anything else to it? Or maybe if you don't um, set your agendas by yourself, you can ask the other party, so what do you think should be the first agenda of the day? And people can start suggesting agenda. So it can go both ways. See what it feels like, what feels better for both the parties. Read the room. Reading the room is important for a mediator. So once you are done, you can ask the parties, do you have anything to add? Ask both the parties and say, do you agree to this? They will say yes or no. And once they agree to it, you can put it up in the chat box if you're in an online session, or put it up on the board or share it on your screen. And then you agree with it. And then you say, all right, so let's move on to the actual mediation. I would start off with the requesting party. Do you have anything to say in the very beginning, having heard the opening statements? So that's how you move on to the next particular phase. So this is how the mediator's role comes in the very beginning, and it is very important that you set the tone for the session, make sure that everybody is comfortable, and then you move on. So you move on to the opening statements for the client and counsel, which Vivek will be covering. Right. So finding the flow is basically a very generic idea of finding a flow for client and counsel from any of the parties. It starts off normally with greetings and introductions, and being a disputing party, you just come in, and you should definitely do this is like, thank you so much for coming to the mediation table. Or if somebody is inviting you to the table, you say, thank you so much for asking us to join you in this mediation session. And we are grateful that we get to solve it mutually rather than going to court and ruin our relations. So acknowledging the willingness of the parties at the mediation table is important. Then you move on to presenting the facts and issues from your perspective and see how you think is better or worse. And then you go on and you stress on the fact that you want to come for develop different mutually beneficial solutions. You do not list the solutions which you have pre-made in mind in the opening statement. Do not do that. Just express a willingness of working towards it so that it opens up the air, and it just gives the other party a signal that you're willing to work towards it. Then you can also stress on maintaining different relationships with the party and going for a long-term relationship if that is a requirement in your problem. And if you're a counsel, you should definitely address legalities. Most counsels normally say, let's try and keep the legal quagmire on the outside. Let's talk about real-time issues over here rather than getting tangled up in all the legalities and legal arguments, which we could have done in court. Let's not do that. So that would be the counsel's role to say so. And then in the end, you just summarize everything you said, and you said that what you are looking for, what is your goal today. You said that in this mediation, I hope and I expect what I expect from you. This is what I hope to achieve. And then you can also set the agenda, say 1 or 2 lines about the agenda so that the mediator gets an idea. Again, there's a lot of difference between client and counsel, but this is like the generic flow of how a typical an opening statement goes. And we can dive into the specifics now. Over to you, Vivek.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. There are a couple of questions in the chat box that I was trying to answer. I guess you could take the last question that's there. So one thing that Sweeney and I hadn't really prepared for, but I think would be a good idea would be to just read out the opening statements that we have prepared for you really quickly in the class so that you get to compare what we've just taught you to what we're expecting from you in today's assignment as well. So I'm just going to quickly read out an opening statement for a mediator. All right. Hello and good evening. I hope that you all are safe and healthy and doing fine during these trying times. I believe everyone present is audible, and please let me know if you have any technical difficulties during our session today. My name is Vivek, and I would like to thank you for choosing me as your mediator. It's wonderful to see both the parties agreeing to this alternative mechanism of mediation, the online format, and given your willingness to come to the table, I'm already optimistic about today's session. To start off, may I please request all parties present at the table to introduce yourselves and tell us how you would like to be referred to during the session. Also, please confirm that you have full authority here to make decisions and representations. May we start with the requesting party, please? So you wait here for the brief introductions, then you say, thank you so much for your introductions. I appreciate you understanding the importance and urgency of conflict resolution in these distressing and turbulent times. Let's strive to make this a productive session so that both parties can reach a consensus that is mutually beneficial. I believe that the parties have agreed to follow the ICC mediation rules for this session. If you could all please agree to these rules just by nodding or a thumbs up. Thank you. My role here today is that of a facilitator to the mediation process. I'm not here to tell you what is right, what is wrong, nor will I express any sentiments towards a particular party during the session. I'm only here as an unbiased participant in this conversation and aim to make this as productive and as fruitful as possible for both parties. Please take the time to recognize that this mediation session is different from a courtroom litigation. in the sense that you are not here as adversaries, but as parties to a dispute that must be resolved collectively. That being said, I encourage you to be open and frank and adopt a forward-looking approach so that we can all reach an agreement. Use this time to process and explore any and all ideas or concerns that you may have with regards to the issues at hand. This mediation is completely confidential. Consider this room or this Zoom meeting as a safe container. Let me assure you that whatever is discussed stays here. Mediation is not only a confidential process in this room, but also in any future litigations. Any and all notes that I may take will be destroyed, and I can provide you evidence of the same. Throughout the session, if at any point you feel the need to have a break or just a private session with either the opposite party or myself, you may call for a caucus. In the caucus, there's another layer of confidentiality added. So whatever is being conveyed during that caucus will remain confidential until the disclosing party allows me or expressly gives me permission to disclose that information to the other party. Please keep in mind that each session will be for a duration of 5 minutes. I would also like you to keep in mind that we have this room booked only for 1 hour. And I also recommend that we keep a few minutes towards the end to discuss what we've talked about for the previous hour, and to also sum up some of the solutions that we may come up with. Lastly, I would like all of you to maintain a sense of decorum in the room. Follow simple rules like not speaking over someone, waiting your turn to speak, using parliamentary language, and ensuring that you try to stay calm even when emotions go high. If you have no further questions, then I would love to proceed hearing the opening statements, and we could move on to start setting the agenda from there. If the requesting party could please proceed. So that's sort of an example of what a good opening statement for a mediator would be. I see that Mudit has raised his hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I raised it a little while back. My question is not related to the opening statement. It's related to like summarizing of the opening statement of the client and counsel by the mediator. So the video that was shared on the Lumis platform yesterday, I was going through that video, and in that video, the mediator asked the other party to summarize like each other's statements. And that makes sense from a mediation point of view, but then from a competition's point of view, is that a wise thing to do?
I would suggest the mediator to do it at least from a competition perspective. You wouldn't have the time for both the parties to go over the entire opening statement, and they might not even be prepared for it. It makes sense for the mediator to do it because you can quickly summarize and make sure what common points you find or what are the different points you find from both the parties, from both the opening statements. And based on that, you can try and draft up the agenda, but I feel you can ask the parties to draft the agenda and give suggestions instead of asking them to summarize the opening statements. That is an actual mediation session, it was kind of a mock session, which I uploaded on the Lumos platform. That was just to give an idea for an absolute newbie who doesn't know like how the process exactly goes, how people present themselves, what language is used. But if you want, you can look up different competition videos on YouTube itself, and that may help you get a better idea about how competitions function.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So next, we're going to quickly talk about what needs to be addressed by the client in his opening statement or her opening statement. So you need to present your understanding of the events, give a clear summary of the facts and how you feel about what's happened, what you feel about the conversation at hand, and what you want from that conversation. Indicate your willingness to cooperate and listen. Say that I'm here because I want us to find a solution. I'm not here to make an enemy. I want us to repair our relationship. So that's sort of where your trust building also comes in, by saying that you're not here to make this worse, but you're here to build back that relationship that you guys have. It would be helpful to make that conversation a little bit more productive. You need to outline your interests, in the sense you need to say that I'm here for these reasons. This is why I'm here. Or you could outline your position saying that I am looking for this. don't lay out all of your cards on the table. Obviously, if you've been given some kind of information that's confidential and that comes out in your opening statement, it should either be because you feel like it's a strategic move to apologize in the beginning itself, but otherwise, it really doesn't make sense for you to let all of your cards out on the table at the beginning itself. Now, avoid demonizing the opponent. In your opening statement, even if you want to express some kind of negative emotions, make those negative emotions to be more about the situation rather than the person. Say that I'm very upset about what has happened. I'm very irritated with where we are right now, but don't say that I'm mad at you or I hate you or, don't use the word hate at all. But you get what I'm saying. Make it more about the situation and the position that you're in rather than about the person on the other side of the table. Make sure you also conclude in a manner that sets the tone for your client to take over and hopefully for the other party to also pick up on that tone. And by saying that, regardless of everything that I've said, I'm really looking forward to this conversation and I hope that only good things come out of it, or I hope that we're able to go back to the way we were before all of this happened. Now, when it comes to the counsel, of course, you need to look at what are the similarities between the other party and you. If there are some clear points of common ground, then you should highlight that as the counsel. Make sure you highlight some legal aspects. If there is a particular contract involved, make sure that you specify the type of contract, the duration of the contract, the starting date of the contract, and any other amounts that are involved. Make sure you don't dwell on these things and that when you're conveying this information, it comes out in a flow that seems less monotonous and like you're reading from a textbook, but more like you're explaining the transaction and the relationship that's there between the two parties. Now, acknowledge the legitimacy of the mediation and confidentiality. Make sure that you support or you advocate the fact that you're in this process. Say things like mediation is excellent and we're very glad that we're utilizing the help of the mediator to facilitate this conversation. My client and I both vow by the confidentiality agreement that we have on entering this process, and we hope that the same can be expected from the other party as well. Now, ideally, you do not set the agenda right at the end of your closing statement. All you do is say that some of the points or issues that we would like to talk about are 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure that you end with this list of topics that you would like to talk about. So even if the mediator is not paying attention to the client and you as the counsel, what you're saying and listing things down in their own words, at least you've made sure for the judge that you do have a plan, you do have a strategy, and these are the points that you want to talk about. And this goes for either party, of course. Sweeney, would you like to read one of the opening statements for the client or the counsel, and I'll read the other one? Or do you want them to just listen to it on the platform later on?
We can read one for just the client or either the counsel. I don't think we might have time to do both of them. Do you want me to read them?
Both, yeah.
Okay, sure. Just give me a second. I don't have them. Yeah. All right. So I think I'll read the opening statement for client for FINEM. Thank you, Mr. Mediator, for your thorough explanation of the mediation process. At the outset, Trade Minister Everdeen, we really appreciate you coming here to this mediation. To me, this signals a desire on the part of both parties to move forward instead of dwelling on the past. You taking out the time to reconsider the dynamics of our relationship is reassuring, and I hope that we will be able to capitalize on this opportunity to find mutually beneficial solutions. I want to start off by talking a little bit about our country's economy at present and try to articulate the issues as we see them. As you know, Penang is the largest shrimp exporter in the world. Being an aquaculture-dependent economy, we are committed towards ensuring the delivery of premium quality shrimp to our importers and greatly value our long-standing relationship with Genovia. In light of this background, you can perhaps better understand why your response to this typhoid outbreak came as such a shock to us. When faced with an unfortunate circumstance, we had hoped that the parties would work together to find a solution. Regardless, we are extremely apologetic if there is any fault on our part in this situation. We hope that we would be given the benefit of doubt at least till the time the real verified cause is found. As the mediator has emphasized the need to be open and frank, we admit that the ban on imports was quite detrimental to us. This is not a loss we can write off easily, and it is an event that significantly affects our current financial position. We have come to this mediation today with the belief that it would provide both the parties with a second opportunity to grow effectively with each other. Our goal today is to maximize the mutual benefits for both the parties, rather than only dwelling on our past losses. For us, the resolution of two issues is key. First, helping you find the cause of the outbreak and contain the same. And second, to renew and diversify our long standing relationship and maintain financial integrity. Thank you so much. So that would
All
be
right.
how a client statement goes. And a similar one would be from the council's perspective, but that would also have a bit more legalities involved in it.
Do you guys have any questions with regards to the opening statements?
Okay, we have a lot of questions here. Is the council not supposed to involve emotions at all, or is a minor overlap allowed? You have to try and keep the emotions separate from the people. I think it is advisable for the client to express more emotions because it's the client's business or the client's country who is being affected, and it becomes slightly a personal matter. Not personal, but at least you have strong emotions towards it. Counsel is just there to advise. There can be a very minor overlap if you want to, and if you feel there is a need, but most of the time I would advise not to. And counsel should be the one who is calming down the client. All right, so we can look at this from a different perspective. Like you're there to support the client.
And to answer his follow-up question, which is never try to match the emotions of the client, could you please explain this a bit more? So by that, I mean, don't try to mimic the client at any point of time. If he goes high, then you need to go low so that there's some kind of balance in the room at that point of time. If the client seems to be getting exacerbated or starts losing it for a second, you just need to say, all right, I'm going to ask my client to calm down. What he's trying to say or what she's trying to say is XYZ. So you need to be that calm, collected, that centrifugal force that keeps everything sort of in order.
Yes, I agree with that. And
The next question is from Amisha. Oh, yeah, sorry.
sorry, okay. Ishika was asking if the counsel can interrupt the client to calm him down. Don't interrupt them. I think you will have that dynamic between the client and the counsel to make sure when to stop emoting. Um, in a competition perspective, in an actual mediation session, you have to take
Yeah.
your own call. But in a competition, I think you will know where to stop. And the counsel can just, as Vivek said, rephrase it and say, I believe what my client is trying to say is so and rephrase and into a much more civil language if that is possible. Before
And
that, we have
also,
another
to add
question.
to that point, sorry,
Yeah.
just 1 second. I think you need to plan these outbursts. As a client, if you ever feel the need to be dramatic, make sure that you clear it with your counsel before going into the round, saying, if this point comes up, I'm going to behave in such a manner. And always have that symbol or that sign or whatever so that you can communicate between each other. If the counsel feels you're overdoing it, make sure you can tap them or send them a text saying, dude, you need to cool it or something like that. One question that I got was from Amisha. How is the opening statements divided among the two mediators? So like we were saying yesterday, this is something that you should ideally do before going into the round. Just talk to the co-mediator for about 5 minutes and make sure that whatever you say, you have, 1, 2, 3, 4 points, just don't overlap. Make sure that you both are saying different things, but you're covering all of the different points. That's essentially how you divide the opening statements. It's just a planned activity between you and your co-mediator before the round.
I
So the
have
next
another
question is
question.
from Devyani Sahu. We'll
Yeah.
finish off Devyani and then go to your question really quick. Yeah. So how should one choose the role for oneself? What things should be considered basically, whether to become a mediator, client, or a counsel? That's actually a really good question, one that we did not think of, which I think we should have thought of. But in my experience, if you are someone who um, comes up with things very quickly on the spot, then you should be the client. If you're someone who's a little bit dramatic, can emote well, those are the good qualities of a client, in my opinion. A counsel is someone who has the ability to know when to butt in, also has the ability to summarize things very well, take like a long speech and put it into concise points. These kinds of qualities are really good in a counsel. The same are good for mediator, but a mediator is someone that I feel should have this calm, collected, wise demeanor. Someone who can just look at someone and get them to shut up. That's like a fantastic quality to have in a mediator. Just that aura of we are going to do this my way. If you're able to portray that, then you'll be quite successful as a mediator. I'm sure Sweeney has some less vague things
No, I kind of agree with that. Should I move on to the next question? Okay. Amogvar says that can you explain the first point, highlighting similar aspects once again? I think similar aspects basically means the structure, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of the same as the client. It's just the council focuses more on the legal aspects, tries to so in this particular problem you have the FTA, which is the free trade agreement. So you can say that both the parties have given each other the most favored nation status under the FTA, and I hope that we continue to uh, uphold the same in our negotiations ahead. But let's not get into too many technicalities of the same. Let's try to keep that aside so that we don't get things bitter. I think I've sent you a sample opening statement so you can see the differences, but the overall structure, in a way, somehow flows in the same direction, is what we meant. So Kanya says, can the mediator try to tell the time if the OS are exceeding 3 to 4 minutes? Um, it is I would suggest not to. It is better, at least for in the beginning, for the parties to let them put it all out there in the open. If most competitions, I think people are smart enough to keep their opening statements short. They can't go more than 5 minutes themselves. Most people will be smart. If they are, then I would suggest try to hold back. But if they're exceeding way too long and you feel this is too much, then it would suggest that, all right, thank you. But mostly do not do that, because it's better that everybody has a good chance, a good amount of time to express their issues. And I'm pretty sure they've calculated why they want to exceed the limit. Manav says again, can the client and counsel talk privately among themselves? Like, can we ask for this, be it an online event, even at venue? So most of the rules of different competitions, they have a provision for a break, which goes for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And if you take the break for longer than that, you might get negatively marked. So you do have the option of taking a break depending on the competition rules. If not, then you have this option, at least you can just take 5 seconds apart and just speak to your client who is sitting next to you and say that, do you think this is okay? And just have this very quick signal between the two, probably a tap on the leg, or just something write down on your notepad or something like that. And that's how people normally talk. And online, you usually have, probably you can have WhatsApp, or they give, if it's on a separate portal, they have a private chat option available for you to speak to them. Again, wow, there are
But
so many.
another thing, just to add to that really quickly, is sometimes in a competition, I have actually been marked up for having a conversation with my counsel during the round itself. So if it's something to do with that's not related to numbers, but rather you're just trying to create a solution and think something through, just talk to your counsel, like look to him or her and just say, listen, I what do you think about this? I was thinking this, and then make everyone part of the conversation. The next question is from Shahid. can a client include a... So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by hypothetical situation. So we'll come back to that question. If you could just elaborate a little bit more.
Vivek, I think you are lagging a little bit.
As in emotionally charged statements from the client appreciated by judges. Is it fine now?
Slightly, yeah. Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, to answer Sahaja's question, I think it has to do with context. So if your emotionally charged statement comes up at an appropriate time, then that's fine. But if you randomly start emoting or you suddenly get upset or you get too upset, that's when you will be marked down. That you need to maintain. For
Vivek, we couldn't hear you for the last
general
few
information
seconds.
because you don't have any other.
Maybe just turn off your video if that is okay. Guys, how about we do one thing, since we have questions coming up again and again, and since we only have 15 minutes for the session, how about we move forward with at least the presentation? We can finish it off and then we'll address every question you have. We'll go through the chat box. You can put it up as you like right now itself, and we can come back to it. Will that be okay? We'll try to address, like, we'll go on for another hour so that at least people who want to finish off the class at least can get done with it. Okay, perfect. I see agreement from everybody. All right, so Vivek, if you can hear me, let's move on to the next stage. So this is what we meant by opening statements, and hopefully you got a good idea. We'll come back to it later. We're going next towards the information gathering stage. So Vivek, you want to take forward from here? Take forward.
Can everyone hear me now? I'm
Yes.
sorry for that. I think my internet just decided to skimp out a little. All right, so information gathering, as we have been talking about throughout the sessions for the last few days, is very, very important. You need to make sure to continuously engage in this process because it's not something that you can just have in the beginning, not have in the end. The reason is it helps you gain knowledge and it helps you build trust. So there is a relation between this. By understanding somebody else's situation and by sharing information um, about your situation, by sharing information about your predicament, you are building trust and you are gaining a better understanding of where the other party is coming from, what the other party can offer to you, and you're also giving them an idea of what you can offer and what would be a reasonable solution for both of you. Now, it also helps break the ice by asking different questions and by making sure that you're having more of an sharing of information, like in the conversation. It makes things easier. It makes it easier for the other party to ask you questions, and it makes it easier for you to how do I say this in a good way? It makes it easier for you to see the humanness in them. And it makes you seem a little bit more human by sharing and asking questions. So, but don't be afraid to ask questions. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of questions that you can ask. So an open-ended question would probably be one where they have to explain themselves. Why did this happen? Or what happened at that point of time? While a closed-ended question could be something that could be answered with a phrase like a yes or a no. Simple things like, do you think, or do you like this or do not like this? That would be a yes or no, but the open-ended would be, why do you not like this? So in my experience, it's much better to ask open-ended questions because it gives them that chance to give you knowledge, to build trust, and obviously to break the ice. As I said, it is a continuous process. So asking these open-ended questions and giving them the opportunity to speak more will be beneficial for you in the long run. So what if, would you consider these types of questions? are mostly going to be asked during the option generation period. They definitely help a lot when you're trying to come up with creative solutions. Now, flattery questions. How is it that your company came to be so, fantastic? How do you guys provide such excellent services? This kind of question would help you understand like who is part of their design team, or do they have some kind of secret weapon or a secret formula that they cannot share with you? And that's what makes their company so amazing. So obviously, based on the context, you need to think of how to warp your question to sound like you're flattering them, but at the same time, you need to be looking for some kind of answer, some kind of information. Just read between the lines of their answer when they're responding to some kind of flattery. Make sure that if they're avoiding that key information that you're looking for, if they're avoiding disclosing that, you ask another question that helps you get to the point. Now, leading questions leading questions are probably something that you've heard of before. Why is it that you found it necessary to behave in such a manner? So you're basically confirming, or you're stating that they behaved rudely, or that they behaved arrogantly, or that they behaved inappropriately, and you're just asking why that happened. You're leading them to accept that they did something wrong or right. It doesn't, but most of the time, leading questions are reserved for when you're trying to blame someone for something. Now, the emotional thermometer, that is essentially, you need to ask, what are you feeling about this? Or why are you feeling so upset? Or is there anything that I can do to make you a little bit less angry? These kinds of questions are really good in terms of getting scores as well, because you're acknowledging that the person is experiencing some kind of emotion. You're showing empathy by asking the question, and you're showing the ability to move past that particular hurdle that the emotion has caused by asking this question, and sort of hashing it out between you and the other party. So a question, we said that we would deal with questions towards the end, so I'm not going to read out from the chat. Moving on to the next slide. So some good questions to ask. How do you see the conflict from your perspective? What do you think of this option as a solution? Could you help us understand your concerns regarding this issue? Could we draw up upon your specialized expertise for this issue? So this is a very good example of a flattery question. How do you feel about this issue? Again, that's an example of your emotional thermometer and figuring out what someone's emotions are with regards to a particular issue. Could you provide us with more details on what you just described? How can we help others in future negotiations? How well are they performing on their present business? What if we tried improving the offer in such a manner? So all of these are just generic questions that can be asked. My suggestion would be you really, really immerse yourself into this whole information gathering thing by talking to your teammates. So be like, just pretend that you're on opposite sides of the table for a second and start asking each other questions that you think should ideally come up, and make a list of these questions. When you go into the round, look at this list and make sure that you're taking each of them off at different points of time. If you come up with different questions, write them down under that list and highlight that either the client or the counsel should be asking this question, because questions like how well are they performing on their present business could be something that the client asks, but it could also be something that the counsel should be asking if it has to do with numbers. Let's say the client is an investor and the counsel is representing the investor. So he's someone that would need to look at the numbers point of view, while the businessman would look at what is he investing into, what does the company do, who runs the company, things like that.
All right, so like we did yesterday, every theory you learned, we were trying to implement it in the in-class problem which we had. So similarly, what we're going to do right now is try and think of information gathering questions for PNM. Now, the first question is, how is the situation in your country? Are things getting any better? So once you're done with your opening statements, you want to start off with something really light. You don't want to go into direct blaming or very heavy questions. like did you find out the answer to who started the typhoid outbreak or anything. It's better to start off with something which is more courteous. So this comes from a very humanitarian perspective, right? So how is the situation on in your country, to start off, like before asking anything. We just want to know if things are getting better with you. Then you can go ahead. The next question is, have you been able to get to the root cause of this outbreak? Now you see the difference between the first question and the second question. The first one is an open-ended question and the second one is a close-ended. Now, when you ask a close ended question, it doesn't leave much room for the other party to engage in a conversation with you. It doesn't leave much room for the party to at least, talk about something else, or they have to very strictly answer to one thing and they might feel a bit cornered over here. And it doesn't help you in any way to lead them on to any other different topic which you would want to consider. So it's better to talk about as many open-ended questions as possible in the beginning, right in the beginning after the opening statements, so that you get an idea of what is the interests, what are the interests of the other party. Do they try to collect anything from confidential information of the other side that might help you on for later on. And you can start asking close-ended questions as you progress in the session much later, where you're trying to discuss the specifics or you're getting more tinier details from the other party. This is extremely important to keep in mind, because I have gotten a lot of feedback on this, that you should definitely keep asking more open-ended questions, and judges mark you on what kind of questions you ask. And there's a whole section for information gathering. Next is considering the situation. Would you be looking at restarting the shrimp imports? And should we go back to the original capacity? You start asking more questions around the same line. So this is giving you more of a leading question, sort of an idea. It's not necessarily that you have to blame it on the other party, but you're trying to lead them in a particular direction where it will eventually help you to come talk about cotton, or come and talk more about the shrimp idea, or the shrimp exports or imports. Then you have, would you want any assistance in improving the situation? So this is another thing which is sort of a midway question, almost an open-ended question. You can phrase it better. These questions which I've written are just very pointed, but it's always phrased with a lot of different sugar-coated questions. You have, since you just told us about the situation, do you need any medical help? Because we will be very willing to help you out. And it's just a matter of our fellow country whom we've had such long relationship with. So that becomes a flattery question as well. So it's better if you try and expand your questions. Keep it focused on one question, one point at a time. But it's better if you try and expand on what you're trying to say to get the other party to engage with you a bit more. Would you be willing to share health records? What would you expect from us so that we reach the previous volume of trade? Is there any other industry you're looking at? So the last one is, pointing you towards cotton industry. So one thing which you should also try and do is, sometimes it's better that you suggest, or you're the first one who puts out a particular point on the table. Say you're the first one who says cotton industry, but it can also sometimes look good on you that you led the other party to believe that they propose the solution, or they propose that we should talk about cotton. And the judges from a third perspective can definitely see this, that you're leading them towards something, and it's not that the other party is excited to do about everything, making the other person feel more comfortable, and being making them feel that they are taking the lead, even though you're somehow internally planting these ideas in their mind, can be visible from a third party's perspective. But you have to take a call very carefully. When should you be the one being upfront and proposing solutions or questions or different concepts, and when it should be leading the other party to create their own options and creating their own offer when it is actually your own offer. So you have to be very careful about finding that balance. Moving on. So once you finish gathering all your information, you realize, oh my God, we have so many things on the table. On the agenda, you have 2 to 3 things written down. You have so much information that, oh my God, the other party has some idea about who did the typhoid outbreak. That's once you have the information, you try to structure it a bit better. And that's when you can get into the brainstorming session. So brainstorming session is not just a tacit way of discussing different options and solutions, but what you can sometimes also do is propose to the other party. I was wondering, how about we engage in a brief brainstorming session of, say, 2 or 3 minutes, where we just put out different solutions that we have in mind, having considered all the information that we just discussed. And let's not pass any judgments. Let's just list down all the options we have, and then we can structure it out well so that we can go into the specifics a bit later. And that can usually help get you a lot of points, but that depends on you if you want to go through that route, or you can just immediately write once you start gathering questions. So say last question was, do you think about reviving the shrimp exports? They say yeah, probably by 30%, and you're like, oh, why about 30%? And then you start going into solutions directly from there. So brainstorming session, once you start going into generating different options and creating value, is different from deciding. Innovation is different from deciding, is that if you're trying to create options, that doesn't mean you've agreed to it. That means that you're trying to find better solutions and better way to make this the best offer possible. Don't criticize anything which the other party is saying. That if they suggest an option, don't start breaking it down and saying this is the fault in that, this is how it won't work out. Just try to say, all right, we will evaluate this a bit later, but since we have different options on the table, it will help us set off things a bit better. So say if the other party is not ready to give you 50% shrimps, in return, there is a possible zone of possible agreement where you can get something else on the table. And that can only happen when you have already asked and discussed different options on the table without evaluating them. So once you have different options, just ideas on the table, then you can start going to the specifics. So avoid evaluating them at the very premature stage, and use these different options which you have prepared or just gotten out by to make different golden bridges. Now this is again a word from one of the famous books, which is Getting Past No, that you try to build a bridge between the two obstacles that you might be facing. There might be two different positions which you have from both the parties, and to fill that gap in through a different solution, or maybe putting two solutions together, you can try build a different a different bridge altogether, so that you can match the interests of both the parties. You have to identify your shared interest, and you also have to identify your different interests, and based on that you can capitalize on it. You need to understand that what is the common thing you need at the end of the day. That is exporting cotton and importing cotton. That is the shared interest. Now different interest over here can be, say Genovia doesn't want to talk about investigating into the typhoid outbreak, but Panem wants to talk about it, and Panem wants to find out who actually did it, so that, reputation building and other things. So that is a different interest over here. And how do you capitalize on it? You try to think about exchanging health records, because once you exchange health records, there might be a possibility you can find patient zero and find out the root of this entire outbreak. So you try and build different ideas and different options on how you can satisfy both the interests over here. Moving on, so that's how brainstorming normally works. Avoid premature judgment. Option generation goes hand in hand with brainstorming. You're creating value over here. Again, this is pretty much similar to what we discussed yesterday, that you're trying to expand the pie rather than splitting the pie into two. It is more of the orange sisters parable, which Vivek mentioned yesterday, that you use the orange in such a way that you get the maximum out of it rather than just splitting into two. Avoid judging these different options before actually exploring them in detail with the help of the mediator. And once you put all the options on the table, you can ask the mediator, can you help us go through these one by one, so that you have a very structured flow of what you're discussing at one point of time, rather than, mixing it all up. And a lot of the time what happens is that you keep going in circles around one issue, and you can avoid that by trying your best to have different options, and going on one option, one solution at a time. So structuring your process during the process is very, very important. So that is how your brainstorming and option generation goes normally. And to give you an idea, I think somebody had asked much earlier in the earlier in the session that what are the different creative solutions you can come up with for Panem. And Vivek, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I'm just going to quickly go through these because I feel like a lot of them are pretty obvious, and we have been discussing them yesterday as well in quite detail. So medical collaboration and sharing health reports would be one option, suggesting that we use Doctors Without Borders, calling them in for help, which is similar to the recommendation that someone made yesterday with contacting WHO. We suggest taking up investigation for the cause of the outbreak together, collectively making it seem like we all are worried about it. That's an option, even though in the confidential information is given that they are aware of the source of the outbreak. Investment deal in Panem for cotton infrastructure is an important option that needs to be explored because it is a goal that your confidential information on both sides for Panem and Genovia has made very evident. You can draft a policy for testing as per international standards, and this testing will have to do with testing of the shrimp as well as of water and the storage of these shrimp, things like that. So when you have options like this, make sure that you actually look into the technical aspects of everything, that you explore what testing as per international standards is. Maybe if you think of this option before going into the round, do a little bit of research as to what those standards are, whether the standards have a name, and if there's something that can be looked at. All of this information, presenting this information during the round, during your option generation phase, would give you extra points. Addition of best practice clause to the free trade agreement. This is also a legal thing that the council would have to suggest, and it's an excellent creative solution that most people will not think of, even though for us it seems a little obvious, but during a competition, things like this don't usually come up, and judges really appreciate such practical amendments to a free trade agreement like this. Reality testing wise, it would definitely pass, and that is a great option. If you guys have questions, like we've been saying, just keep posting them on the chat so that in the end we can go back, and you can even mention the slide number that you have the question on, so that we can come back to it later on. So the next part we're going to discuss is the caucus. There are a couple of types of caucuses that you need to look out for. So that's the mediator party caucus and the client-client caucus. So at one point you can ask the counsels and the mediators to leave the room, or you could sit with your counsel and the mediator and talk it out. So I've had a couple of client-client caucuses where we just, relax for a second, we forget about parliamentary language, all of the etiquettes, and we just hash it out really quickly, figure out what each other's problems are, and then call people back in and inform them in a very dignified, civil manner exactly what happened or what the conversation was. Mediator party caucuses are excellent when you have some kind of drawback or disadvantage in your confidential information. You need to share it with the mediator. Maybe you can even ask for their opinion about that particular piece of info, see if they feel like it's something that can be revealed to the other party. Of course, the only reason you do all of this is to get those extra points in terms of using the mediator and ensuring that you reveal the right information at the right time. Now, timing is really important with regards to when you call the caucus, to use the mediator to generate options and privacy to explore statements that have been made by the other party. So recently I was judging a round where the one party just immediately called a caucus so that they could give all of the facts and sort of lay down all of their cards in front of the mediator. Ideally, that would not be a preferable strategy because you haven't even had the time to sort of converse with the other party or with the mediator for that matter, and really understand everybody's perspective on the issue and whether there's some common ground that can be found initially. So it's important that the caucus happens obviously after your opening statements. I would suggest after a good 15 to 20 minutes of some kind of conversation, so that during the caucus you have something of substance to discuss with the mediator. Now, the purpose of a caucus is usually to keep legalities aside and to talk business. So during a caucus, it doesn't make any sense for you to say that, oh, we're going to need an NDA clause or we're going to need this change made to the FDA. Things like that. It ideally should not be discussed in a caucus, but you should be discussing things like, do you think that merging these two companies would be a good business decision in the future? Or this is something that I've been thinking about. I could buy them out and we could make the majority control under our company. Just bouncing these things off the mediator, as well as emotionally venting. That guy's really annoying me by what he's saying. I'm finding it difficult to control myself during the round. Could you please do something to help me get through this conversation a little bit more calmly? So things like that, that's what you should be talking about during the caucus. So the next part, we're going to be talking about some communication skills, and I think it's really important because you will be judged on this, and it's also great for your general development, forgetting about competitions, and also just using these skills and these tips to conduct yourself a little bit more better in professional settings. All right, so we did have a little video here for you, and I'm trying to share that. Let's see if it works. Can you guys hear what's happening?
No.
No, you're not able to? Yo. Okay. Exit. Oh, geez. Sorry for that. Is it audible now?
No, it is not audible. Since we've already extended time, do you want to just?
I guess we'll just skip over this.
Yeah.
All right. So to give you like a quick summary of what the video says, it was just Dwight being stupid, saying very inappropriate things, and it sort of clearly makes you understand why it's important to listen and have the right body language. So I think that's what we were really trying to highlight through the video, that it's important to listen and always have active listening turned on rather than just passive listening.
So
I think Swinny will elaborate a little more.
Yeah. So active listening is one of the most important components in mediation and also in your professional life moving forward. It's not just nonverbal communication. Like in the video you would have seen, it's not just nodding your head or looking at them, but it's also for your own self, where you're listening to what the other party says. Calm your mind. Don't normally, when anybody is talking, you're just thinking of different questions or different opinions, what you want to respond to them. Just calm your mind, listen to them clearly, because what they're saying will usually help you to move forward. And try to step into the other party's shoes, look at things from their perspective and see what are the issues they're facing. And that is what active listening is. You definitely need to keep asking for clarifications or follow-ups. If you don't understand anything, so you can ask something like, if I'm understanding or if I heard it correctly, is this what you're trying to say? Could you just clarify what you just said? All right, so I understand what, as I hear you, what you're saying is so and so, but in addition to that, what do you think of so and so? So you have to keep listening and responding to every question, ask for clarifications, paraphrase what they're saying, summarize it. Don't blame them, leave judgment out of the picture. just try and listen from somebody else's perspective and try and get an idea of what they're trying to say. Usually I've seen a lot of people get stuck in this constant circle that they don't find a solution. They're just going over the same point over and over and over again, but that is happening because nobody is actively listening to each other. One person is trying to suggest an option, but the other party is just not listening to it. So it's important that you are listening to the other party, and not only listening for your own self, but you're also trying to make the other party feel comfortable, that the feeling of being heard in a room is most important in a mediation. When you walk into a room and if you feel that nobody's listening to you, that angers anybody, that angers the clients the most, and you need to be careful that you are not doing that. And as a mediator as well, it's not just for the clients and the counsel. The next communication skill is oratory skills. Vivek?
All right, I'm audible, right? I'm confused when I'm muted, when I'm not muted. So the thing with communication skills, it's really hard for us to teach them. So I mean, while we give you these pointers, it's important for you to really like practice and also see if other people are able to see that you're making that effort or that you've changed in terms of your communication skills. So ask your seniors to help out or your friends to see if you're using short and clear sentences to enunciate and emphasize what you're saying, whether you can control how fast you're talking, whether you're thinking before responding and not just jumping out and saying something. Make sure that you stick to the point, simplify and stay on message. If, I mean, there's this, when I was learning math, people would say, eat like this, don't solve the problem like this. So when you're speaking, also don't beat around the bush, and make sure you use respectful language. So I'm known to have colorful language, and things like BS or just the S part, all of that is not considered disrespectful for me. But if you're in a round, it is considered disrespectful, and it will be looked down upon.
So voice modulation is extremely important. One thing you always have to keep in mind is that you're not monotonous. You have to be loud and clear, and your sentences loudly, as again the previous speaker mentioned, and
Okay, I think something happened to Sweeney's connection for a second, so I'm just going to take over really quickly. Voice modulation, as you sort of have been seeing, I tend to struggle with this because I do have a lot of ums and ahs while I'm speaking, and sometimes I also forget that my voice is kind of droning. So it's really important for me to keep that in mind and consciously make sure that I'm always trying to, go up and down. That it's just something that, like I said, that you have to pick up over time, and it's not something that comes to you just one night of practice or anything like that. Make sure that you also maintain some confidence while you're speaking and calmness. If you notice when my video sort of had some issues or my connection issues were off, I started babbling and like going on and on and on about the same point. That was me losing a little confidence and calmness. But it sort of comes back as you move on with your conversation. So if you do get flustered at one point of time, don't let that ruin your entire flow. Now, with nonverbal communication, there are a lot of things that you need to focus on, especially when the only body part that's visible is your face. So you need to make sure that you're relaxed, that you're sitting straight, not slouching like this in front of your computer, because you can see my head is completely in front of my shoulders. But when I sit straight, it looks a little bit better. Make sure that you try to use hand gestures. So Sweeney has been doing a good job of positioning her computer so that you can see her hands move. My computer has been a little close up. So even though I do use my hands a lot while talking, you can't really see those movements unless it's near my face, which is kind of a natural. use inviting hands. I just covered that. Mirror the emotions and the concerns of the other party. So if someone is saying that they're upset, do not smile at them and be like, oh, you're upset. Actually, like, frown a little, be like, oh, I understand what you're going through. That's so hard. Or you don't have to say these things, but say it in your head and then do that with your eyebrows and your face. And all of that really helps to make sure that you seem like you're immersed in the role and you're not just there for the sake of being there.
Acknowledging emotion. So sorry, my laptop decided that it was a good time to restart itself. Um, so acknowledging emotions is extremely important because you need to, as the last point Vivek said, that you need to mirror the emotions of the other side. You need to offer comfort. If somebody is really stressed out about a particular issue, you need to make sure that you are there for them. You're trying to not, be condescending towards them or just ignore what they are feeling and sticking to your position. You're trying to um, improve the situation in this mediation session. So you have to try and offer comfort. Step away to the balcony is again a point which was suggested in one of the books, which is that you take some time, as I mentioned earlier, that you have the time to take a break and leave the room for a second, calm your mind, and then come back in again. So even whether you leave the room or not, you just take a second. It's all right if you don't respond for, say, 2 or 3 seconds. Take your time, think about it, calm yourself down, think about it rationally, and then go back into the session and answer properly. Just taking a break is always extremely important. Come back to the triggering question after discussing other points. So, if there is an issue which, say, this is, I think, in Panem versus Genovia would be doing. If you keep asking, if Panem keeps asking, so did you find out about who is responsible behind the typhoid outbreak? Genovia would try to avoid that question. And if Panem gets an idea of it, you should try and come to it much later after you have agreed upon the other substantial issues as well. So if you keep pressing on somebody and if you keep pointing towards somebody that please answer this question, why you're not doing it, and this kind of annoys somebody and then they do not want to cooperate with you for the other issues when you could have easily done that. So if there is an issue which you feel you're getting lost in, then discuss other things and come back to it much later in the session. Emoting in competitions is different, yes. So as we have continuously discussed over the last 2 days, that emoting in actual sessions, in real life mediation sessions, will be much different because there you will have your personal issues involved, you will have legitimate concerns about your company, and it is fine if you're showing this some disappointment or you're showing that you're upset, but in competitions you're being judged on that. So there is a limit to what you can emote in a particular session. You need to control it. It is good to express your disappointment, displeasure, or that you're upset in a round, but again, to a limit. You should show some amount of willingness that, okay, fine, I'm trying to improve my mood here, and you can, let's talk about something else, or let's try to improve this. You have to show some amount of willingness to move forward. If you don't, then that just makes you a very uncooperative party in the particular round, and you do not want that. You will be marked low for that. Trust building. Trust building is extremely important. You can ask questions continuously to the other party about how they feel about this particular issue. That will give us an idea about whether this will be acceptable by them or not. And when you ask a very open-ended question with a slightly emotional aspect to it, then that gives the party to be a little bit more open and freely express their concerns about it rather than hiding things from the other party to not seem vulnerable. Um, Trust building is also important from mediator's perspective. Mediator, it has to play a very good role in acknowledging emotions. One thing which I've seen the judges say quite a lot of times is that in a caucus, one of the first important questions which the mediator should ask, so how do you feel about the session so far? How are you feeling? And that is a very good way to start off a caucus, because caucus is always, most of the times, called at a point where there is a complete block of conversation. The conversation is broken down and you just want to take a break and go over what has been discussed so far. If everything was fine, then you wouldn't have to call a caucus. So it's better to be the thermometer in the room, and every once in a while just check if everything is going up to what was expected.
So next, we're going to talk a little bit about using the mediator. It's really important for you to look at this in two different ways. If you are the mediator, then this list that we've given you here is sort of what you need to be doing. If you're a negotiator, then you need to make sure that the mediator is doing all of these things, because you're going to be marked both ways. If the client and counsel as negotiators are not asking for these services from the mediator, you're going to get marked down. And obviously, if the mediator is not doing these things, then you're going to get marked down. So I'm going to go through them really quickly because we have been talking about them quite often throughout the last 3 days. Setting agendas, listing down possible solutions, confiding in mediator and using them to create innovative solutions. That's probably during the caucus. Reframing sentences, technical assistance, understanding the other party better, and the caucus. Now, one tip that I feel I'm going to just re-emphasize again in terms of listing down possible solutions. Now, it's important for you to utilize a visual aid as the mediator, and this isn't always done on the online format. So talk to the organizers, see if there are rules regarding that. I personally like to have an Excel sheet or a Google document where things can be very clearly listed. You can share that with all of the different parties to the mediation as well as with the judges so that edits can be made from multiple computers and not just from one. It's a really good way to make it a collaborative process during this whole online format. When it's offline, you'll have this whiteboard. So that just makes things very easy to deal with, or you'll have, a large piece of paper. That's usually how you can set the agenda on that paper or the document. You can list out all of the solutions. You can even reframe or you can concisely list out different issues that people have had so that you make sure that you're ticking things off that, okay, issue one was dealt with and this was the solution, issue two was dealt with, this was the solution. That way at the end, when you're summarizing everything that's happened in that conversation, you don't need to think. It's all there on the board or on the document. You just need to say it in a good way.
So, coming to the final part, and that's the last slide for the day, that is negotiating an agreement. So, after you have given your opening statements, gathered your information, done the brainstorming, gotten into the specifics of these options which you've created, and negotiated, and eventually started agreeing upon things during this session, the final bit with the last 10, not 10 minutes, at least 5 to 6 minutes or 10 minutes, you should leave for summarizing and ensuring that you go over everything you have agreed so far. It will never be that you agree to everything in the end and you just keep discussing and discussing for the entire 40, 50 minutes. You keep making some agreements along the way, and it is better that you ask the mediator to summarize whatever you have agreed so far. Now, from a competition perspective, it is not necessary for you to reach an agreement. You do not get marked. It's like a math question paper for ICSE or CBSE board. It's the marks are not just for your final answer, but it's for the steps you followed, which were the formulas you used, and that's what you get marked on more than just reaching a final settlement agreement. So make sure that you try and agree on as many things as possible, and if not, then you can say that let us try and come back to this in a future session, and hopefully we can discuss this in further. But at least for now we can agree that we do want to discuss this particular issue in the future. So that shows there's at least some partial agreement or consensus on a particular issue which can be discussed in the future. Avoid bargaining, because it's better. Bargaining is again positional bargaining. It's better to try and be open and frank and try and use your interest to come to a solution rather than just saying that we want 50% and then 10% and then coming down to 25%. Don't try avoiding the same. Leave it to the councils. A lot of the people just say that, okay, so we have agreed to so many things so far. Maybe we can leave it up to the councils to draft up the agreement and we can take it forward from there. The councils also can take up the role of just summarizing everything of whatever we've discussed or whatever they want to put in the agreement and make sure you get a final yes or a no from the parties. Even the mediators can do that. Usually, there's kind of a fight in the between. I've seen a lot of people do that who wants to take up the job of summarizing because that gets you extra marks. Be collaborative on it. It's not too many marks that you're going to get. And the last thing is express your gratefulness. Again, just say a good thank you, good thank you to the mediator, to the other party, and just say that thank you for this particular session. It was great, and we hope to ensure that this agreement that we've agreed upon works well in the future, and we do not have any further disputes. So that's how you end a particular session, and hopefully you got a proper idea of how a session, 1 hour session goes normally, step by step, and the best steps which you can take to ensure that you get the maximum marks in a round. And that would be the end of today's class. We can move
So
to questioning now.
before we move to questioning, I feel like some people are going to leave for the questioning. But so I just have two pieces of advice because this is the last day of instruction that we have. The next couple days, tomorrow will be our panel discussion, and the day after will be our final round. So two like parting notes, I guess, from my end. Really, really immerse yourself in your roles. If you do not take this seriously, it's going to come out. The judges are going to see it, and to be honest, there's no point of you to be spending all of that money, going to different countries, meeting all of these people if you're not going to take this seriously. I've seen a lot of people who are just like, oh, it's a role, it's just a thing. I didn't do much work, I didn't do much research, and they don't excel. So make sure you really take your role seriously. Think of it as your own business, think of it as your own client, as your own mediation session, and go ahead with the round. It'll really, really help you. The next part is read your score sheets. So ideally, you want to make a list of things that you need to cover, that you need to do well, and just tick them off during your round. Now, it's important for you to maintain that balance of keeping it natural while also trying to attend to the score sheet and accommodate everything that's given on that list. So only with practice will you be able to find that balance. Don't get irritated if it's not something that you're good at in the first few rounds. Really try hard, keep practicing and making sure that you find that key balance between the score sheet and also between keeping things a little realistic. That's pretty much for me, and thank you so much for being so attentive and staying with us till the end. Swinny, what do you think you'd like to add?
I just want to say, please do show up in large numbers tomorrow because tomorrow is going to be a really, really fun session. We have three experts coming. You can see their bios. They will be up on the Lumos website. It's Dr. Andrea, Purvi Satija, Jonathan Rodriguez, and Yashasvi Raj. Please do come tomorrow because I know a lot of you have questions about careers in ADR, if not careers, and how to look at it from a judge's perspective. We just gave from whatever we've heard from judges in the last 3 days, but you can hear it everything from the judge's perspective, right from their mouths. And also get a lot of tips from Yashasvi, who is also a very talented and a very successful participant in ADR competitions. Do come tomorrow in large numbers and feel free to interact with them, ask questions, and it is a very great networking opportunity. If you do pursue more ADR competitions after this, hopefully we inspire you to do so. If you do, there is a high chance that you might meet them again, and it would be really great to have such great mentors for you in the future. So please do show up tomorrow. And I think we can end our session there. We can move on to questions. You are free to go if you have to, and I understand we again overstepped the time limit, but we can go to questions now.
So the first question is, if you're trying to find a solution, you can talk to your counsel in the middle of the session, but one should avoid talking to their counsel in the session directly, right? So yes, you should avoid having direct conversation, but if it flows, if you're discussing something with the other party and then you just look and you're like, oh, so what do you think about that? That kind of conversation is okay. But ideally, you're right. You shouldn't be talking to your counsel. You shouldn't be figuring things out with your counsel, debating facts, working out numbers. All of these things should not happen in the middle of the round.
Also, just a
The
quick
next
thing.
question is, who should usually ask the flattery questions?
Just 1 second, Vivek. A lot of people had messaged me privately with questions. I have lost all my chat because my laptop crashed. So just put them up on the group chat again for everybody to see, or just message me again because I do not have any questions anymore in front of me. All right, you can go ahead with the question that you just mentioned. Izzy.
Okay, cool. So the next question is from Anushri Buddha. She asks, who should usually ask the flattery questions and the emotional thermometer questions, the client or the counsel? So in my experience, it's mostly been the client and the mediator, but that shouldn't stop you from asking these questions as a counsel. If you feel like there's some awkward pause or there's definitely reason for you to intervene and ask this question, then go ahead. Of course, this instinct develops over time. So don't jump in randomly, don't interrupt people. Um, Make sure you ask it when it feels right. And like I keep saying, this feeling will develop over a period of time. It's not going to come to you right away. The next question is from Samved. He asks, with regards to opening speeches, how do we convey that we think they're responsible for a certain consequence that's adversely harmed us, while at the same time not coming off as hostile? So, like I said, you could say things like, I'm really, really disappointed in the situation. I cannot get over where we are right now. I'm truly irritated. And I really feel like some kind of proactive action on your part, or anything, any kind of vigilance or the lack of, has led to this, and I would like to discuss it further to get a better understanding of what happened or why we're where we are, and whether you could clearly depict what stance your company is coming from. That's, I mean, an example of how you could probably approach them doing something to you that's directly harmed you. Swinny, do you have anything to add here?
Um, I agree with whatever you said. You can express disappointment, just phrase it very carefully and very perfectly, as perfect as possible. And you can end it with probably just a glimmer of hope that we expect something, from you, that maybe you can help us move out of the situation. If you just end it at a little bit of positive note, then you might be able to handle the situation a bit better.
So the next question is from Kiara D'Souza, and she asks, but can the mediator offer their opinion as to whether to reveal information or not? Yes, the mediator can, but only during a caucus. So if you're in that confidential setting, then the mediator can say, I do suggest that you reveal this information so that you seem a little more forthcoming and so that we can get to a solution a little quicker. But do not make this suggestion during or after the caucus is over when the other party is in, because then it makes it seem like the other party is hiding something. And it's your job to remain neutral and make sure that you're not adversely affecting any of the parties. The next question is from Devyani Sahu. Swini, did you want to add anything to that?
No, go ahead. I can only
Okay.
see the questions, so I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm going ahead with all the questions, because you're on your phone, so it's just easier for me to read. So the next question is from Devyani. Are we supposed to share every confidential information to the mediator explicitly? No. This is where you need to strategize. You need to think whether giving the mediator this information is going to be useful, whether or not revealing this information later on in the round is going to be helpful for me to come up with a creative solution. Now, make sure that when you're hiding information, you're not doing it in a way that makes you seem like you have malified intentions. So by doing that, you're definitely going to be marked down by the judges if at any point you seem to be doing something that's immoral, or if you seem to be hiding information without just cause. Manav says this is a holistic workshop. I'm guessing that was for our video and the failure of the same, but thank you so much for the comment. Harsh asks, what is the role of the mediator in a joint session or the brainstorming sessions? So the main role of the mediator at this point of time would be to take down notes. Make sure that you're keeping track of every kind of solution that's been said. Make sure you're rephrasing it in a more concise manner that's easily understood by both the parties. So in case at any point of time, if a party says, I'm confused, I don't really get what you're saying when another party is giving a solution, the mediator can step in and be like, if I may, I did understand what party A was saying, and then you can explain it to party B in a much more understandable manner. That's pretty much the role of the mediator. If there seems to be some kind of uh, lack of understanding, or there's not a clear way route of moving forward with a particular option, then you could say something like, I've often seen people in this industry move forward with their solution in this way. In another mediation that I was a mediator of, the parties did this. Make sure that you maintain confidentiality while you're saying all of this. Don't use people's names, things like that. But also make sure that if you have this kind of interjection or this kind of suggestion, you're not doing it at a point where the conversation is flowing well, or you're not doing it in a way that seems interruptive to the entire process.
In addition to that, it's not just the role of the mediator, but if you as a client or a counsel don't understand anything which the other party is saying, it looks really good on your part, at least from the judge's perspective. If you ask the mediator, Mr. Mediator, I'm not understanding what is being proposed. Could you help us understand or maybe break it down for us so that it's easier? So it's your job as a negotiator also to continuously keep the mediator in the loop, to not forget about that they are not present. It sometimes does get annoying that the third person is just speaking for no reason, but you get marks on it. So be very tactical from a competition perspective and keep the mediator in the loop.
So the next question is, how do you handle impasse where both the parties are being stubborn in their own individual opinions, and who should lead in such situations, the counsel, mediator, or any client? Now, in my opinion, if there is clear stubbornness, it should be the mediator who steps in and says, I feel like there seems to be an impasse, or I feel like the conversation is going in circles. So you need to make sure that when you interject, you're saying something diplomatic, and then you say, maybe we should try and discuss another issue. Maybe let me try rephrasing what the other party is saying to you, and let me do the same for you. Or you could say, maybe it's time for us to go into a caucus so that we could discuss what's going on a little bit more freely, so that we get a better understanding of the situation. So these are just a couple ways for you to deal with impasse. Swinny, do you have anything else to add? Okay. Kiara, your hand is raised. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a question with regard to the mediator calling a caucus. So if the conversation is flowing rather respectfully and they're in a proper flow and stuff, because it had happened in a practice session and I didn't call a caucus, so would that be an okay thing to do? Or like, since it's part of the score sheet, at some point should you be calling a caucus, or is it okay if you don't?
So it's okay if you don't. If you feel things are going smoothly, then it's all right if you don't. It's not just on the mediator to call a caucus, but it's also on the negotiators to call a caucus at the right time. And once you call for one, you need to have a good reason. If you don't have a good reason, then you will be marked low, that you're just wasting everybody's time for calling a caucus which is not needed. A lot of the times you will quickly understand that this is the point where you need to call a caucus. That's when people are keep going in circles, and then they don't have a solution. It's easier to figure out why, but make sure that you call it for the right purpose. Don't call it unnecessarily. If you do, then you can't justify in the caucus, then you will be marked down for it. So just not for the
But
mediator, but for
also,
the parties as well.
so a good way to make sure that you're not losing out because you didn't call a caucus, when you're summarizing everything, when you're at the end of the session, just mention, so during this session, we didn't have any private conversations. We didn't call a caucus. Is that something that you both are okay with? Did you feel like the session played out well? So most likely, if you haven't called a caucus and there is some kind of consensus, both the parties are going to say, no, it's fine. We appreciate the way you led the mediation, and the judges will appreciate the fact that you cleared it with them.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So
Are
the
we
next
done with the older
question.
questions, or we have them
Oh,
more?
no. We still have a bunch more. So the
Okay.
next question is from Harsh, and he asks, what should be the ideal reaction of a mediator in the caucus if a party tries to include the mediator or ask his or her opinion on the possible solutions. So this again depends on what kind of solution is being asked. If it has nothing to do with you compromising your neutrality in the entire situation, then it's good for you to give your opinion, be like, yeah, that is a good idea. I really think that could help. Or you could say, realistically speaking, I'm not exactly sure how this would pan out, but I still think it's a great exercise for you to share that solution with the other party, and we could discuss that a little bit further together rather than just in this private setting. So that's probably the extent to which I would, give any suggestions. I wouldn't go on to change their possible solutions, or I would just comment on whether or not I think it's practical, and I would definitely encourage them to discuss the suggestion with the other party as well. Sweeney is nodding, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. Surabhi Parekh asks, since there is a time constraint of 45 minutes, do we really get time to ask many questions to the other party? What if we aren't able to, since we need to negotiate on solutions too? Now, ideally, even before you get to the negotiating phase, there should be a lot of different questions that you ask. And while you ask these questions, as we showed earlier on, you do get a lot of the common ground. You do get a lot of the interests of the other party. And by listing down the answers to all of these questions, you're doing the first part of the negotiating task itself. So it's not like information gathering or asking questions is exclusive from the whole negotiating process. It's something that needs to happen throughout. Even when you're just going back and forth with numbers, you do need to make sure you're asking, why are you pricing it at this level? Or why do you think that you deserve more money?
Also, it won't just be you asking the questions, but you will be also the one who will be answering questions from the other side. So it will be a two-way process. You can't prepare a list of, say, 14 questions and go in and be like, I have to ask all these 14 questions. So some of them will get answered eventually while the other party is answering them or during the negotiations itself. You have to, sometimes the rounds are 1.5 hours long, depending on the competition rules. And accordingly, you can structure how long you want to keep the information gathering. You just have to take a call. And eventually, when you feel like the time is right to go further into the session for negotiation and option generation, then you have to take a call according to the situation. I think we have a question before Surbhi's from Divyani. How to handle impasse where both the parties are being stubborn and their own individual opinions? Did we answer this question?
We answered that question.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, we did.
All right. So I think the next is Prantika.
So the next
How
question
is
is from.
are you doing it? Okay. Okay, fine. You want me to go ahead? Okay. Um, Next question is from Prantika. How is the mediator's background preparation different from the negotiating parties regarding the problem before a round competition? I think the benefit which the parties normally have is that you have more information and you have the ability to prep for information gathering questions or even prep for brainstorming or just think of some ideas before for solutions before going into the round. Mediators, a they don't have to think of all this. They do not have to prepare for brainstorming solutions or anything. But what do they have to prepare for is having a very good grasp of interests of the parties, and that is easily something you can deduce from the common information. If there is additional stuff, say cotton, which was there only in the confidential information, then that will eventually come onto the table. And that's where you have to, continuously keep active listening. You have to listen and note down every new thing you hear. The prep will be a bit more less than the other parties, but you have to be much more active during the session because what you hear in the session is what is going to help you move forward. So how collaborative you can be, I think the best way for mediators to prep is do more and more rounds and make sure that you are trying to understand things during the round itself and you may not get too much to prep with.
Another thing that I'd like to add with regards to mediators prep, you need to make sure that you have clear expectations when you come into a round. Once you look at your general information, you'll get an idea of what the issues are. So based on that, you need to figure out, all right, so these seem to be appropriate questions. These seem to be appropriate conversations to be having. So if you're meeting those expectations during the round, then that means that you're controlling the conversation well enough. If you feel like things are not being addressed, things are going a little haywire, then clearly you haven't set your expectations right. And you haven't done that required prep in terms of doing a little bit of research into what the industry is and things like that. As a mediator, you are expected to have basic, if not expert knowledge of the dispute that is being talked about at the table. Next question is from Sukanya. How should we proceed with the preparation of the role of the mediator? I think that's pretty similar, or literally the same question that we just had. So Sukanya and Prantika, if you have any follow-up questions, please let us know.
I
Next
think
is
Mudit has a
Mudit.
really good question. All right, so
Sorry,
he
you
says,
go for it. Yeah.
he says, in the event that parties do manage to come to a settlement regarding all the agendas during the session, how should the mediator end the session? Are there any formalities that need to be fulfilled? I think then the mediator, again, it's pretty much the same. You summarize everything you've agreed so far, and then you thank the parties and you appreciate them, saying that this is great that you have come and resolved every issue that we had on the table. I have seen that happen quite a lot of times. You end up finishing the round quite early, and then everybody just goes in circles thanking everybody, and that goes on for 5-6 minutes. So just make sure that you say that you address the council saying that I hope you will take this into consideration, whatever we've discussed. I will send you a list of everything. I'll send you a proper document with today's minutes, and you can use the same to draft your final settlement agreement. And then they hopefully working with you in the future or something like that. That should be the
So
end of it.
like a small personal story or whatever here to add. When we were in Hong Kong, there was a particular round that ended really quickly because of this. We reached a lot of solutions, and I was the client at that point of time. And our mediator, like Sweeney just said, was just going around saying, wow, amazing, so happy that all of this happened. And then after a point, I just got so irritated. I was like, yeah, so I think we should all go out for drinks now because, we're friends and we've established this relationship, blah, blah, blah. And then that's how the round ended. But the judge said, I'm really glad that you ended it there because it was like a dog chasing its own tail. It was just going on in circles and circles. So if you're a mediator or you're, a negotiator in the situation, try to end it on a light note, but end it quickly. Give the mediator the chance to summarize and all of that. But if it goes beyond that, where it's just saying thank you and things like that, there's no need to run out the clock. Some people feel like it's necessary to keep talking until the end. It's really, really not required. Next question is from Samir Parihad. He asks, as a mediator, should we request or instruct a caucus? I feel like as the mediator, it's your job to do that. Make sure that you do it at the right time and look at the parties and say that, all right, I feel like there's this impasse, or I feel like there's some kind of a block between both the parties. Then do you feel like having a private session at this point of time would be prudent for the benefit of this conversation? Most likely, both the parties are going to say yes. In case they say no, you can just say, all right, let's revisit that at a later point. Sunny, do you have anything to add? Okay. The next question is, how would this strategy work, especially when the confidential doesn't have much to say, that a party decides they won't be taking any caucus and they explicitly mention it in their opening statement? So I do not think that this is a good strategy. So what I understood was in your opening statement itself, you state that we would not like to have any kind of caucus. Some people feel like it's an attitude or a way of saying that we are an open book and we do not want to. I've seen this happen. People are like, we don't want to hide anything, so we won't have a private conversation. But you're also making it seem or putting an ultimatum to the other party that you should not be willing to have a private conversation, or you should not want to have any confidential time with the mediator, and that's discouraging them from following the actual mediation process. So you will lose points for adopting a strategy like that. Swinny, anything you want to add? Awesome. Okay, so the next question is from Devyani again. He asks, as we have our teammate becoming mediator, he or she will be knowing all of the confidential information. However, the mediator is supposed to not know the confidential information. Will you please explain the structure of the competition? So usually, if you have one team member as a mediator, your rounds will be at the same time. So the mediator will not go in before you guys or after you guys. And you should not be sharing any of this confidential information with your mediator teammate, whatever you've received. So that half an hour before the actual round itself, when you get your confidential information, you will be separated from your mediator and they'll be going into a separate waiting room or something of that sort. Then when you both go into your round at the same time, obviously information becomes general to everyone. So you don't have to worry about that overlap. Avantika asks, can mediators propose solutions if they see that neither parties are thinking in that direction? Yeah, so you propose the solution by saying, I have seen in previous mediations, or a common practice in this industry would be to move forward with this type of solution. Do you feel that this solution could be applicable to your context? Or do you see any similarities between the context that I just described and your situation? So that would be a good way to make a suggestion without seeming biased towards either of the parties. Okay, so Shachi, do you have a question?
Yes, I apologize for taking up so much of your time.
No.
So I had a doubt. It's not pertaining to today's session as such. However, it's regarding a question from yesterday's test. May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the question was a true or false type question, which read that compromise is the ultimate goal of mediation. I marked false. However, according to the portal, the correct answer was true. So, if compromise is truly ultimate goal of the mediation, doesn't it sort of beat the purpose of mediation? Because, as per my understanding, through mediation, we seek to create win-win situations, right? So, if compromise is the ultimate goal, then yeah. So,
I think that might have just been a technical error. I'm really sorry for that. I will correct that if that's there in there. But
And your score
the
will also
answer is
change.
right. Yeah, your score will also change. So don't worry
okay.
about it.
Okay.
I think that might just have been a technical error which didn't get saved while switching the answer. So apologies to
Thank you so
everybody about
much.
that.
No,
I didn't know
I'm
that was
extremely sorry.
happening. Thank you for pointing it out to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for taking up your time.
Yeah, your answer is right.
Yeah. Okay, Soumya?
Yeah, so I have a question. So at any point in the mediation round, do we speak about our Batnas, Watnas, or Zopa, or is it only for the purpose of writing down in the mediation plan?
So ideally, don't refer to Batna, Watna, or Zopa as words. You should be talking about your zone of possible agreement for sure, putting it in terms of your interests, your options, things like that. Just mentioning the content of your ZOPA. Batna, Watna, even the content, you need to very carefully choose when you want to talk about it. Ideally, it's for a caucus with the mediator saying that if this guy doesn't listen to me, then I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this, which is even worse. But if you want to make it aware to the other party, that is also a strategy that you can adopt and say that if you don't meet me halfway, or if you don't try to collaborate with me on a solution, then I'm going to be forced to do this, which is something that I do not want to do. That is probably the best and only way that I would suggest it, because you're not sounding adversarial, you're sounding a little helpless by saying it in that sense. If you use your Batna or your Watna as a threat, then it's not going to be appreciated by the judges.
I have something to say in addition to that. So, definitely do not see that this is my Batna Vatna. That will never happen in a session, and that's a bad way to go about it. But the only way I see, yeah, the only second way I see you using Batna is that sometimes if if the other party proposes a solution or you propose a solution and the other party is not ready to, negotiate further on it, then if you're trying to look into the why questions, what is the reason why, or why are you not agreeing, or trying to go about the solution in a better way, then you can try and explain that why is this particular offer not feasible for you. That you can say that if this is what we take, if we take $20,000 from you, then that is no better than us actually getting $20,000 from elsewhere. That would be your BATNA, if that makes sense, if you're getting what to say. So you can try to show your BATNA to the other party by saying that this is no better than us getting anything from outside if we don't come to an agreement with you. But we do want to come to an agreement with you, and we hope that you can make this offer a little better. So if that makes sense, but definitely don't use those words in the round. Just that will only be for your own understanding to see how well off or worse off you are in a particular session.
Yeah, all right. It made sense. I understood. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Any other questions, guys?
I had a small question to ask. I'm sorry, my hand is not raised. Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah, this is just something I've noticed from some videos, but how do you feel judges or even, teammates consider like banter, like light banter, either in the beginning or at the end of the session? Is it something positive or, should we kind of keep that aside?
You mean banter with the judges or banter among the friendly banter among the parties?
Like, I think something about having a glass of wine later on or going for, I feel like I've seen that between some parties sometimes. I just want to know how the judges take that.
That is fine, as long as you're trying to lighten up the mood and you're still in your role, as long as you don't break your character and you're doing something which is totally uncalled for, it should be fine. I've seen people make jokes. So like there was this if we had a problem with cakes involved in it, so there were people were making jokes like you can't have your cake and eat it too, and then everybody was laughing in the room. So everybody likes that, to lighten up the mood, and it's absolutely fine if you do it. Just don't overdo it. Maintain your character and make sure that you're just doing it as a business person or as a professional in the room. That happens all the time in professional lives as well, so that's okay.
Also, a lot of people make jokes that are kind of like jibes. This has happened to me multiple number of times. Like, oh, remember when you failed to meet? It's just like that, or like, just don't do things like that. Even though it may sound funny, it's don't do anything that's derogatory in any sense.
Yeah,
All right,
people
got
do
it.
make a lot
Thank
of
you.
fun.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's
That's not
all
only
right.
for ADR, that's for moods also. People write their 15-minute long speech and then they write 3 puns inside it and they think it's funny. So do what you
So
want.
just two like rules of thumb, I guess you can say. Keep it short. It shouldn't eat into too much of the actual talking time, and make sure it's respectful and not something that can be taken in a negative sense.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Sukanya is so sweet. I love her comment.
Yeah, dude.
Guys, any other questions?
Are there any more questions? Do you guys just want to talk and like
Yeah,
say something? Please go ahead.
we can talk about anything.